Hey guys, it's Dr. Kim Sage here. I am heading out on a Sunday morning to get some journal supplies early before anyone shows up at Michael's to begin this new series of how to heal I am bad as I made in this video series. It's going to be a self-directed journal with prompts, art journal, writing journal, very simple, no pressure. Many of you have asked for resources on how to help yourself, and while this is not therapy, I hope you can find it as a way to help heal yourself as part of your treatment, as part of your self-love and work. And so let's get started and head to the store. Hey guys, this is the first video I'm so excited to share with you, which really gets us started on this journaling series on healing shame. And really the kind of shame that we find in CPTSD, in complicated interpersonal type relationships and trauma that often begin in childhood and unfortunately get carried into our adult lives and acted out. So I was racking my brain trying to figure out how to create something that I thought might help go with the videos I make. So each video in this series will have not only a journal prompt, but also a topic I'm going to talk about just from sort of a clinical and research perspective with each one. And I hope we can all journal together, and I hope you will truly find it helpful. Okay, so at a minimum, all you need is some type of journal, some type of notebook, and a pen or a pencil. Now this journal, while you might want to write down the prompt, you can use art, you can draw, you can color, you can write. I will be giving you writing prompts, but if you're not comfortable with writing, feel free to just sort of connect to the topic, doodle what comes up, write words or phrases, or actually draw with art, and or do all of it. The whole part of this that's really meant to be meaningful is integrating the material into your psyche in some way, maybe in the moment writing it, releasing it, coming back to it, or not coming back to it. There is no perfectionism allowed. That will be a topic later in journaling, in art journaling. And so it's not about rating yourself. In fact, if you find yourself doing that, I would highly encourage you to do some breathing, some affirmations, things that help you get back on track, and remind yourself that there is no room for anything but just your true self to be in this process. Okay, so all you need is a journal and a piece of paper or pen. Now, as you just saw, I did a little trip to Michael's and gathered some supplies. It took me about 30 minutes. You can do as much or as little as you want, incorporating stamps and stickers and art and all kinds of amazing materials. But this is kind of what I've created so far, right? So I realized after I got the journal that I did not have the binding that I probably should have, because if you want to use those really cool tapes and tape things in, you might want to do that. But I also wanted a very large space to write. I like to have room. I don't like the little journals because I feel like my hand gets cramped. But you may love little journals, so no pressure there. Do what you want. I went on Pinterest and I just downloaded and dragged and dropped a ton of pictures that I found that were calling to me. And then the same day I went to Walgreens and picked them up. And then I used my sort of crinkly scissors and I've cut them and pasted them in different ways. So feel free to use your own images from your printer. Like I said, magazines, downloadable art, whatever really resonates for you, and whatever markers and things like that. So you just need to have some kind of a journal. Now, the very first page is really the exercise about creating your dream healed self and what that might look like. And I want you to be able to see that every time you open your journal. So I have cut and pasted mine into the hardcover interior, which I'll show you in a second, on my journal. The reason why it's so important is that when we are carrying a lot of shame and lack of worthiness, we often don't believe that we are worthy of even having dreams, that we are even able or capable of making our dreams come true, or we just don't have it in us to have the space to allow ourselves to hope and dream and imagine and fantasize. And also, usually we have to do the work to get there. So it's really important that we connect with that part of ourselves, what our lives would look like if we were no longer carrying the burden of shame, the burden of unworthiness, the burden of that sort of I am not lovable. And so this is what I've created. Now I will share, this is a little more vulnerable for me, but I think it's important to share. So for me, I chose images, and this is my first hardcover page, that if my dream self were completely healed, all these things would sort of, I kind of hesitate to use the word manifest, but they would be a byproduct of my life. And if you know me closely, you know that I love Paris and France more than anything, really, in terms of geographical locations. And I've been there several times with my kids, alone, with one kid. It's just been something that a place that really is, I believe I was meant to be born in. And so mine has images of Paris, my ideal Paris apartment, and of course macarons. I love the ocean. I live near the beach, and that's a part of me that I always feel really drawn to in nature. So I have some of those things here. I love the Marais. This is my favorite place in the city of Paris, one of them. And then I have just little expressions and sayings and butterflies, right? So you can do whatever you want, but it's really important that you connect to your grounded, but also sort of otherworldly dream self that would create all this opportunity and beauty in your life if you could release the heavy burden of those statements that are often I am statements, or I am not, like I am not lovable, I am unworthy, I am bad, and things like that, okay? So that's the first assignment for this journal, if you're going to do it with me. Now, the next page is really the connection to our inner child. And this is a really important page. I'm going to set this down for a second and I'll bring it back up. When we have a childhood filled with not good enough, which I think we all have this issue, right? So you could do this journal even if you don't have any real clear trauma or CPTSD. Most of us carry some amount, I believe, of unworthiness or shame. I think it varies on a spectrum in a very significant way. But in a culture that says look a certain way, act a certain way, be a certain way, it's pretty hard to not have some places in your life where maybe you are more harsh or limiting with yourself than you might really want to be. But the idea is that our inner child is really this, Carl Jung first described this little part of ourselves who is the purest self. It is often the healed and unhealed child. I don't think it's one or the other. And it often holds our memories, our experiences, even things that we can't necessarily cognitively recall. It is the total sum part of all of who we are, all of who we were, all of who we dreamed we would be. And I think of it as sort of through the lens of that innocent child, the child who just wants to be loved, be accepted, be nurtured, and be adored. And, no one has the perfect childhood, but that inner child to me is that little self inside that we want to love and nurture really all of the days of our life. And in a more complex type childhood, the inner child is often more damaged, has to be more pliable and more shifting and less rigid because life was not safe, and or they became really rigid to protect themselves. So all these strategies we might adopt helped us survive that child self that then grows into an adult. But deep inside, we hold that little self. I'll never forget my godmother, who just died this last year, was in her 90s, and somewhere in her 80s, she said to me one day, we were talking about, getting older, and she said, I always feel like I'm about 19 years old inside. I think you always feel about 19. And I don't know if that's the number for you, but I think that's true, that we all feel, younger than we really are. And so maybe that connects back to just sort of like that vitality and youth and innocence that as life goes by we can lose, but we want to connect to. Now, when we have a sort of disruption of the inner child, there's a developmental block there oftentimes for children who have a more wounded inner child. And these are often kids who didn't necessarily get the full freedom of attunement and play and joy and safety and security. And it could be everything from a more traumatic childhood to a parent who called you names, or a grandparent, or to being bullied. You know, it could be all kinds of things that blocked that sort of authentic and wise and yet beautiful, innocent combination of the self that should have developed but didn't. And so we often see spontaneity that's lacking, being punished for speaking your truth and speaking up, being told who you should be and who you should not be, not being allowed to express emotion, not being given love and cuddling and adoration, like I said. And so there's all these ways that the developmental blocks can really prevent our inner child and often just keep them stuck, right? Not even able to bloom and move through the different stages even of childhood. So with all these words in the journal, it's really important that we begin to connect to, I think, our inner child selves. And that sort of beautiful play and joy and freedom, you know, like running through a meadow freedom that we think about in films, right? It's just this like openness to the world. So on the very first page, what I think is important before we sort of start into the deep work of the journal, which is the first few pages, this is what I wrote here. I put, "You are worthy of love and healing. For this child, I wish everlasting peace, love, joy, and joy for all her days." And then I wrote, you know, "Keep calm and love Paris." I cut out from my Pinterest photos. "The life of the healed child is filled with beauty." There's a picture of me here, and it's important if you decide to use a photo of yourself that you use a photo that has no negative connotations of you or your childhood. I chose a very, actually really young photo of myself. I don't have memories of being this age, but in this picture I can see that I'm laughing and full of joy. Now, you may have a childhood where you don't have any photos, or maybe a childhood where you don't really have any positive photos. And in that case, either skip the photo and draw yourself, right? Draw yourself even as a stick figure. You can also, this sounds kind of crazy, but you can cut out photos of other children that might have looked like you. You just want to find a photo of your own or create one that elicits joy. We don't want a trauma photo here of something that happened to you when you were a kid, and every time you look at it, you're brought back to that trauma. So try to find something that brings joy in some way that is a replication of you. And then, you know, I'm still doodling. I've been copying different amazing YouTube websites on doodling and journaling, but writing things that make me happy: peace, love, joy, France, Italy, you know, helping people heal and grow, love, Paris, whatever you come up with. So you just want to connect to like the things you loved as a child is another good one. What did you do as a child that you did solely for joy, right? So I will tell you that I played with Barbies probably longer than I should have. I rode horses. We had horses. I collected horses. It was just this dream. I loved unicorns, right? So I could have put those on here too. So just connect to the purest inner child in yourself and make sure you spend some time really connecting to it. It might take you a few days, it could take a few hours, but make sure you connect to that sense of self that is truly what you believe the core of your best child, most loved child self.